Welcome to Aligned to Impact, the podcast where conscious leadership meets bold entrepreneurship. I'm your host, Summer Huntington, and each week we dive deep with founders, innovators, and thought leaders who are rewriting the rules of business from the inside out. Here we talk mindset, brand, content, culture, the real stuff behind building a legacy-driven business that doesn't burn you out. No filters, no fluff, just real conversations that inspire aligned action and intentional impact. If you're a visionary leader ready to create with purpose, grow with integrity, and lead with your heart, you're in the right place. Let's get into it.
Yeah, so the first book I wrote, it's a book called The Cooperative Family. Look, oh my gosh, look, I even have a little copy. This is the copy, this was the preview copy. It's all marked up with mistakes. But it's a book basically about family relationships. And the basic idea of it is that families struggle when they get into competition with each other. And that happens in, let's say, marriages and life partnerships. There's competition between couples.
Big warm welcome to Calvin Armerding of Travelers Rest Counseling Associates. Thank you so much, Calvin, for taking the time to be on Aligned Impact podcast. I'm excited to have you.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So Calvin, tell us a story about why you got into this work.
So when I was growing up, I was always just very interested in why people do what they do. Just always had a kind of curiosity about human behavior. And then when I was a junior in high school, I had an English teacher who assigned a short story that was basically a therapy session between a therapist and a client. And I remember reading it and thinking to myself, I cannot believe that people get to do this for a living. Just to like sit in a room, have an interesting conversation with somebody who's having a hard time, sort some things out, make sense out of things that don't make a lot of sense. And really from that moment on, I have wanted to be doing some kind of counseling or therapy, and went to school, immediately enjoyed all of the classes that I took that were relevant to this career, and I just never stopped, never really looked back, nor am I upset about that. I really am happy with what I'm doing and have maintained my curiosity about people.
I love it. And you have a pretty strong specialty in being a leader in the Adlerian community. Did I say that correctly? Adlerian?
Oh, it's so close. It always gets people. It's Adlerian.
Adlerian.
Yeah,
okay.
It's just that D and that L at the beginning. Yeah, always get people mixed up.
So I consider myself like pretty well, educated in psychology, and never once have I heard of Adlerian. So it definitely must be really niche. Can you just break it down for our listeners so that we know what Adlerian is?
Yeah, first of all, it's not rare to have not heard of Adlerian psychology, unfortunately, and I think that that's changing a little bit from a few different angles. But Alfred Adler, this is where we get the word Adlerian. Alfred Adler was a contemporary of Freud's. He was in Vienna with Freud and Carl Jung all at the same time. Those three were there. Sometimes they're referred to as the Viennese Three. And he was a little bit in conversation and part of a group that Freud put together, but ultimately he had some really significant disagreements with Freud. First and foremost, that maybe everything wasn't about sex, and there were some other things that were going on with people's behavior. He was also much more social in his understanding of people. If we think of Freud, and I'm not saying this to speak ill of Freud, but Freud was very interested in the individual and what was going on with them kind of in isolation. And Adler was much more interested in the social embeddedness of people. Freud didn't take real kindly to Adler disagreeing with him and promptly kicked him out of the group. And there's a whole history to that that's kind of interesting. But so then Adler had students that he sent to the United States, mostly to flee the rise of the Nazis in Germany, and set up a few schools and institutes in the United States. And then those students had students, and those students trained me. And so that's how I kind of came to be part of this very lovely but very small subculture of Adlerians in the world.
Awesome. I definitely want to get into that a bit in our conversation, because I feel like it is such a unique angle, and the work that you do, and the speaking work that you do, and the books you've written. It seems like you're really, really well involved in this community. How has that been so far?
Oh, it's been really lovely. I mean, one of the great things about us being a small, not particularly prestigious group, and I don't say that as a put down to us, is that I've had some really remarkable opportunities that I don't think that I would have had if, let's say, I had committed myself wholly to cognitive behavioral therapy, which is just so big and so massive, and there's so many people doing it, and so many people doing research. Because it's a small community, I've had these incredible opportunities to teach and to train and to learn from other folks really all over the world. And so I was just in Bulgaria for a short amount of time with a friend of mine who I've met through a few different Adlerian organizations. And a few years before that, I was in the UK doing a training, all from people who I just have met by being an Adlerian. And because we're a small group, they let relatively young people, I can't even say young anymore, but relatively young people do some cool things, teaching, training, speaking, all those kinds of things. So I feel very, very fortunate.
Nice. Would you mind sharing just a little bit of maybe like the philosophy or even how an Adlerian trained therapist, such as yourself, how that session might be different from CBT or cognitive behavioral?
Sure. So I think first and foremost, we're not a technique-driven theory. It's as much philosophy as it is scientific theory, which is not to say that it's unscientific. It's just not particularly technique-driven. But our basic understanding of people is that every human being has what Adler called feelings of inferiority. And those are just, we look out at the world and at other people and we say, well, I'm not as, fill in the blank. I'm not as big or as capable or as smart or as good looking or as, I'm not sure that I'm up to that challenge, so on and so forth. And that in response to those feelings of inferiority, which though uncomfortable are not necessarily pathological, they're normal. We respond to them by striving away from that feeling of inferiority towards a feeling of completeness or superiority or accomplishment or perfection. And in addition, we have subjectively created an idea everybody has about what is the good life. What is this felt plus, this good way of being? Everybody decides for themselves what that is going to be. For some people, it's very, very important to be good looking. For other people, it is not. And to them, it's important to be smart, or the best is to be noticed or paid attention to, or to be impressive, or to be, we could fill in the blank. Adler called this the fictional finalism, and later in his work, he called it a guiding self-ideal. This kind of idea, life would be good and meaningful if such and such were true. That desire for Adlerians, that drives all of our behavior. And it is also the reason why we experience certain symptoms. So rather than seeing symptoms as mere diseases, that you sniff up through your nose while on an airplane, like a germ, we think of symptoms like anxiety, depression, anger, things of this sort, as solutions to problems. Now, it's not to say that we're not trying to fetishize them or to minimize the negative impacts that they have, but when we can see that, when you most desperately want to be impressive, what you get anxious about is not being impressive. It's not just, the grizzly bear. I mean, of course, you get, scared of the grizzly bear too, but you're really at your core, you are anxious about not being impressive. If you're angry, it's that you're angry. You're saying, oh, damn it. I mean, I am impressive and people should notice. If you're depressed, you're saying, oh, doesn't matter how hard I try, I'll never be impressive. Doesn't matter what I do. It's always going to end up in failure. And so then we withdraw from a challenge. So seeing symptoms as solutions, I think that's something that you would notice that's very different between Adlerians and other therapists. A few other distinctives, and then we'll call it a day for theory. We do have a robust definition of mental health. I'd say that a lot of our culture, our definition of mental health is failure to meet criteria for a DSM-5 TR disorder, which I find a little disturbing I don't think that that's a very robust definition. It's great when people don't meet criteria for a disorder. I'm not sure that that's equal to health. But for Adlerians, we have this great big German word. Germans are great. They just smash a bunch of other words together. And this word is Gemeinschaftsgefühl. And often that's translated in books as social interest. A better translation probably is community feeling, a feeling of belonging. The way that I've described it is that it's a feeling of belonging with all of its benefits. That's the, warm fuzzies of, oh, yeah, I belong, but also all of its responsibilities, that we understand that we are here to make a contribution to other people. And when we experience that, when we have that feeling of community and we act out of that, for Adler, that is what health is. It is not an IQ number. It is not the absence of symptoms, in part because we need emotions like anxiety and anger and sadness and some things that are really unpleasant. We need those in order to make proper contributions to our community and to pursue the flourishing of humankind. So I think that that's a distinctive. In terms of just what a session would look like, often we talk a lot about family of origin. We call it the family constellation, but it's basically family systems work. We also will ask a lot about early recollections, so your earliest memories of life. We may ask about dreams. We look at them a little different than the Freudians, but we will ask about dreams and daydreams. We'll ask about challenges that we weren't prepared to face when we came upon them. And we'll ask also about early childhood illnesses or disorders, because we think how those are handled say a lot about who we are in the present.
Wow. Well, thank you for the knowledge bomb. I really appreciate it. And I know a lot of my listeners are nerds about this sort of stuff. So I think just getting as much exposure to different philosophy, especially when it pertains to mental health, performance, it's just the more knowledge you have, the more you can dive into different perspectives. And I really like what you said about it. The symptoms are solutions. That is a very different approach, I feel, than most of the mental health providers that I've been interviewing. It's a totally different take. Yeah. So I'm curious, how do you see your role at Travelers Rest Counseling Associates fitting into the bigger picture of your mission to encourage the discouraged?
Well, this brings us a little bit back to Adlerian psychology. So Adler's idea about people is that people were not ill, they were discouraged. When they would come to see him as a psychiatrist, he didn't think of them as ill, he thought of them as discouraged. And the reality is that there are demands, there are tasks that nature asks of us to handle. And when we get discouraged about handling those in a straightforward way, in a courageous way, it's not that we get cowardly, it's that we get discouraged and we withdraw, or we create sideshows, or we try to gain control that doesn't belong to us. We utilize unhealthy mechanisms for managing the tasks of life. And so so much of what I see looking around, and this is both with my clients, but then also in a societal way, so much of what is going on is that people are so deeply discouraged about being able to manage challenges. They're discouraged about having a place, so belonging, with any kind of significance. And so you look at even the most unhealthy things that are going on, war or white supremacy or sexism, heterosexism, transphobia. These kinds of things, they're out there. And it's not that we can't make a moral judgment about those things. I think that's fair. But to go a level deeper and to say, oh my goodness, people, they really are so discouraged. They are so frightened. They are so, they're wanting to go around the tasks of life using these mechanisms because they don't think that they can handle it head on. And so it's not to excuse any of it, but it is to say there is a path through the middle where we encourage rather than merely pathologize, rather than merely judge. We endow people with a sense of courage that, hey, we can handle this. Maybe you can't handle it alone, but we as humankind can handle the tasks in front of us. You can make a contribution. And by the way, that's how you gain a sense of belonging and significance, is by making a contribution, not by having the world made in your image, or not through comfort or utter safety, things like this, but through making contributions. And so the work is psychotherapeutic, but it's also deeply sociological. It's sociopolitical. it's all of that together. And so how I show up as a clinician, I try to keep that very congruent with how I am outside of my office. I don't do that perfectly, of course, but I try to have those things be congruent.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of things that I really resonate with that you're sharing. And one thing that I would love to just share with you and just get your perspective on is the idea for me. I'm often coaching coaches to actually make a body of work and to impact other people. And it's through, I've found that through them actually making that contribution and launching their program and launching it into the community, that's really when people find their sense of purpose. And so in a similar way, it sounds like you're really encouraging people to have the purpose and the contribution to society to help them feel more whole. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, there is this incredible thing. There's this great book that I think probably is one of the most insightful psychological texts that I've read in the past 15 years. It's called a book called Tribe by Sebastian Junger. And he details in his foreword to the book, he says that people do not buckle under hardship. In fact, they thrive in it. What they struggle with is feeling that they're not necessary. And so when we make a contribution to people, no matter how small it is, doesn't have to be sexy, doesn't have to be showy, doesn't have to be much of anything really. When we make a contribution and we notice that we've made a contribution, it's really hard to not feel like we matter. And it's really hard to not feel that you belong when you've made some kind of contribution. And so rather than thinking of belonging as this thing that is given to us, to understand that we actually have some power to bring that about. Not utter power, not total power, but we do have some agency there. And so much of that comes through contribution, not through uniformity, by the way, which is kind of interesting as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely, you're cultivating this deeper sense of resilience through contribution and connecting with society, yes. Finding purpose. So what does an average day look like for you as clinician, mentor, and someone who's deeply involved in advancing Adlerian psychology?
It looks like utter chaos. So 4 days a week I see clients, and that's kind of let's say the bread and butter of at least the business side of what I do. That's the bread and butter. Is I see clients for full hour sessions. I see mostly young adults. I see some couples. On occasion, I'll do some family work, and I just go back to back to back. I like doing it that way. It kind of gets me in a flow state. So I'll do that 4 days a week, and then the days that I'm not seeing clients, sometimes I'm resting, I'm spending time with my family, but I'm also working on these other projects, putting together workshops. I started a post-grad training program in Adlerian psychology for folks in our area with my business partner. So there's things like that. I published a book already, and I'm finishing a manuscript for a second right now. So there's plenty of that. I have a Substack that occasionally I'll publish some things on there. I'm also, and this is less related to the business, but then I've got an infinite number of hobbies. I informally study architecture, and I'm a songwriter. I actually have a single coming out almost a month from now, and so utter chaos is basically my answer. I'm just kind of chronically hypomanic. I just like to go. But I like that. I like that there's diversity in what I am doing. I think I have a very low tolerance for boredom. And I don't mean that I get so bored of my clients. Of course, I don't mean that. But I mean that there's a kind of monotony to the day of just doing the same thing over and over. And so mixing that up with writing projects and creative projects and teaching and training and workshops and travel and all those kinds of things, that really helps me stay healthy and stay kind of on my growing edge, which I want to do.
Nice. It sounds like organized chaos, and it helps you thrive and contribute to society in many, many different ways and forms and through different mediums.
I think that's very charitable to call it organized, but I will take it. I will take that word.
Well, from a fellow multi-passionate entrepreneur, I'm all about the flow state. And if you can get into a flow doing the things that you're doing, then more of flow is, I mean, I've actually studied flow pretty extensively, but putting yourself in that flow state changes your brain waves and it allows you to tap into creativity, and it's like a hyper-focused state. So it's super cool.
Isn't it great? I love it.
Yeah. So tell us about the first book and even the second book manuscript.
Yeah, so the first book I wrote, it's a book called The Cooperative Family. Look, oh my gosh, look, I even have a little copy. This is the copy, this was the preview copy. It's all marked up with mistakes.
Nice.
But it's a book basically about family relationships. And the basic idea of it is that families struggle when they get into competition with each other. And that happens in, let's say, marriages and life partnerships. There's competition between couples. There is competition between siblings, of course. There's also competition between parents and their children. You know, somebody trying to get the one up, whether through power struggle or attention getting or, you know, all kinds of things like that. And then also we have competition that exists between different generations. If you look at how different generations talk about each other right now, it tends to be pretty contemptuous and not very kind. And a lot of it is about one-upping and getting a one-up position on other generations. And so each of those kind of dyads of couples and parenting and sibling relationships and between generations, I devote chapters to looking at, hey, here's how we compete. Here's how we get out of a competitive mindset with these folks and into a cooperative mindset, understanding that we're all working in the same direction, which is everybody really wants to thrive. Everybody wants to belong with significance. People want basic autonomy and respect, and we can all work on that together. And when we do, then things tend to go better. And that doesn't mean we have no conflict. It means that we are much better equipped to manage the conflict that comes along, and in a way that pushes us into closer relationship rather than this kind of disjunctive process where we get pulled apart. That's that book. I published it in 2021. I still really believe in that book. I think it's good. It's fun to read. It's not a tough read. It's not academic.
And real quick, what's the title on that first book in case our listeners want to look it up?
Yeah, it's called The Cooperative Family.
Great. Thank you.
Cooperative Family. And the second book, I have a loose title for it right now, and it's Tenets: How to Get Along with Yourself and Others. And the idea of it is that I again and again in sessions have these repeated conversations with clients over and over again, and this is not their fault. It's fine that we're having these conversations. But anytime that I'm having a conversation over and over, there's a sense of, hey, we probably could scale this. You know, like we should get this written up, published somehow so that it's just readily available. And maybe it also would be preventative so that folks don't end up in my office because they can just, read a book chapter or something. So this book, Tenets, it's basically a collection of 10 ideas that are kind of basic emotional health stuff, but that I find are kind of revolutionary for folks when it's articulated. It makes this massive difference in how they understand themselves in relation to other people. So little bitty things like there is a difference between what happens and the meaning that we give to what happens. And we need to make a distinction between the two. So, somebody shows up 10 minutes late, it could mean that they don't care about you, that it's possible. And you have a right to give things a meaning, But let's recognize that them showing up late is not the same thing as them not caring about you. Those are two different things. They may both be true, but they're not the same thing. So that's maybe one example. There's a whole bunch, one of which is, learn how to laugh at yourself. If you can't laugh at yourself and recognize how absurd you are, there is just a level of misery and suffering that you're going to have to carry around with you unnecessarily in life. So I have 10 of these, and each one kind of gets unpacked. Again, I wrote it I think it will benefit therapists, but I didn't write it for therapists. I wrote it for anybody with let's call it a 10th grade reading level or something. I want everybody to be able to enjoy it and benefit from it.
Nice. Yeah, I think having something like lighthearted, especially in the field of mental health, is going to be very effective for just helping people understand themselves, but also have some clear action items to focus on.
Absolutely.
What major shifts are you seeing in the field of counseling today, especially in how clients view therapy and engage with it?
Well, I think a few things. One is that so I'm 37, and when I was the age of many of my clients, I see a lot of college-aged, up through young adult clients. When I was their age, there was still kind of a lingering stigma about being in counseling. Some of that was geography, me living in the Southeast, but then it's just maybe generational too. It wasn't real strong stigma, like people weren't calling you, a psycho if you were going to counseling, but there was some lingering stigma and people are pretty secretive about it. Now, it's more status symbol than anything. Like there's a level to which people will have a therapist because they're like, well, my friends have one, and I've got, and the good news is, right, they do have stuff to talk about and work on, and but that's been a big change. I think almost, I would say overwhelmingly for the good. I think there's a level to which there are times that everybody can get a little trigger happy with self-diagnosis or things like that. Some over pathologizing tendencies that people have, but really I'll take it for if the flip side of that is that we have a dramatic reduction in stigma. So that's one thing. I do see an enormous amount of anxiety disorders, or things that would meet diagnostic criteria for anxiety disorders. I think a huge part of that, this is not to go on a big rant, but I think that societally we have a very weird idea about anxiety and how to solve it. We have this idea that the solution to anxiety is safety. And listen, I'm not anti-safety. I want there to be relative safety for folks, The flip side of that is that that's a recipe for the development of anxiety disorders. So when you're anxious about something and then your solution is to move away from it, rather than your anxiety staying the same size, it tends to expand out to your level of withdrawal. So then you withdraw again and again and again, and then you have this massive anxiety. This is how we could give people an agoraphobia or really any other kind of specific phobia by pursuing this. And so to see that the solution to anxiety is not, it's not that safety is bad, it's that it's not the solution, and courage is our safety. This is actually how we treat anxiety disorders. I don't care what your kind of methods are, all treatments for anxiety disorders are essentially exposure therapies, where we are, rather than helping people to move away from what frightens them, to move toward those things, with some safety mixed in, but it's a scary experience. And so that's something that I'm constantly working on with clients, helping them to see, hey, let's not get you safe, let's help you get courageous. And we can keep some of the safety here, but let's get you courageous, not safe.
I have a riff for you, Calvin. I am curious what your thoughts are on this. So just what you said, you hit the nail on the head. So we have a retreat we're about to go facilitate, my buddy and I, we've been teaching these retreats for the past 4 or 5 years, workshops, and then they turn into retreats. And we basically take everyday humans and we give them weapons, we give them staffs, and we teach them hand-to-hand combat, civilians. And so we're literally teaching them resilience and that ability to get that nervous system exposure. And at first, some women are like really tentative, some guys even too, their staff striking is like really, it needs a little work, but by day 5, they're embodied, their confidence is up. And so we definitely look at that theory that you're talking about, and we train it on the physical level. Curious if you have any thoughts on that type of exposure therapy of giving humans weapons and teaching them to collaborate and fight.
I mean, I love this. I think that there's this idea that we often have that if there aren't just incessant safeguards, that people are just going to get grievously injured and things like that. And it's really, all of our science says the opposite. I even, somebody can fact check me on this, by the way. I'm open to being fact checked on this. But it's this fascinating statistic the other day that countries where people generally do not wear bicycle helmets, they tend to have fewer bicycle injuries, which is kind of interesting. And in Scandinavia, there are schools that have kids, go out to do undirected free play, out in the woods, and there's these little kids with machetes, cutting their way through the forest, and you think, oh my gosh, you can't give a child a machete, and they're, climbing 60 foot up in these trees, and no adults are saying, oh no, that's too high, come back down. And nothing really terrible happens. And along the way, children start to find this way of being, of like, oh, I swung that machete really hard and all my friends got scared and now they won't hang out with me. So maybe I better be a little more cautious. And, ooh, I climbed up really high and I slipped a little bit and that was really scary. So maybe next time I'm going to be a little slower about how I climb. And they figure all that out. And so there's this feeling of empowerment that we don't have to have incessant safeguards. And so something like fighting, learning this hand-to-hand combat, at first, it feels very scary. And then you do it and you discover that you actually are quite capable. And isn't that a wonderful thing to discover about yourself, is I can handle it, right? And that's the opposite of discouragement. That's a feeling of capability and courage. Really, really, what a beautiful depiction of that. That's really cool that you're doing those retreats.
Yeah, one of these days I got to bring out some specialists, some psychologists, because we've been just doing it from the performance coaching and flow state perspective, but to tie in some of the psychology, I feel like there could be a collab in our future. Wink, wink. Okay, next question. With all the tools emerging in mental health, the wearables, the apps, how do you see technology influencing, supporting, or complicating the therapeutic process?
This is such a good question. If it's okay with you, I'm also going to mix in a few comments here about AI, if that would be all right.
Sure. Oh yeah, I'm all about it. I'm in a digital AI mastermind right now, so yeah, this will be good.
Cool. Okay, so I'm one of the interesting things about Adler is Adler was very big on what we now call a psychology of use, meaning that he was much less concerned about what you have in terms of intelligence or beauty or talent or whatever, and much more concerned with what are you doing with it. And I think that's very true about technology as well. I think that, okay, we have all these things, right? That we have all these apps, that are out there that could, oh my gosh, they can help you monitor your mood and look at your heart rate. And so, oh, you're kind of freaking out, aren't you? Why don't you take a few breaths? All of that, I don't think that there is anything. I think that those things are morally neutral. I mean, this is Prometheus and the fire, right? The fire cooks the food and it burns down the forest. And it depends on how we go about interacting with technology. So, I've seen people misuse technology to where, it becomes this kind of crutch that you lean on, of like, mental health becomes this assemblage of self-monitoring and a smattering of coping skills. And I don't think that that's what mental health is. I don't think those things are bad, but I don't think that's what mental health is. And so you can kind of, people have talked about, oh, wouldn't it be great if we didn't have to do counseling anymore? And listen, I actually think that would be great. I don't think it's going to happen, but I think that would be great, because then people would not be suffering. And that's a beautiful future. I will find something else to do with myself. I'm not worried about my ability to make a living, whether I'm doing this or something else. But I'm unconvinced, because I still think that so much of what works in psychotherapy is the relationship between counselor and client. It remains our most consistent and best predictor of therapeutic success, is the fit between counselor and client, and a therapist's ability to really connect on a bunch of different levels with a client. And so I don't think that apps and things like that are ever going to really replace that, at least not in the very near future. What I will say about AI is there are companies out there that are collecting enormous amounts of data, much of it from therapists by having them on an online platform or something like this. And they're collecting that data in order to build AI bots that can do therapy. And I think that that's going to work really, really well for highly manualized treatments, meaning, okay, I'm going to put you through a 12-session protocol. Session 1, we do this, 2, 3, 4, and then by session 5, we're going to be here. And then, sessions 10 through 12, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. I don't really have a problem with those treatments. I do think that they are not long for this world, because I think that you're going to get an AI something that is going to do that much more effectively than a human being, if that's all that you can do. I think that if what you can do is sit down in a room and creatively and compassionately and in a deeply human way connect with people, I don't think that's going anywhere anytime soon. And I think that's really beautiful. So I see maybe in the next 20 years us recovering a sense of mystery, and the metaphysics of what we do. I see, and not to be like too woo woo about it, but I do think that that's gonna come onto the scene of like, what can't you really quantify very easily? And I think I think the therapists who can continue to do that are still going to be doing a lot of good. And by the way, maybe this other stuff will dramatically affect the affordability of mental health care, and may also create some preventative measures that I think would be really beautiful. That's kind of where I see technology sitting, is in the preventative space. The main stuff is still going to be there, and we're going to still keep doing our work.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate your perspective, because as a coach and a coach of coaches, I've oftentimes wondered, like, is AI going to be replacing us? But I always come back to, there's a deeper transformation when you're interacting and you're with a person through every step of the, coming into the forming stage, the storming stage, when things get hard, and you're able to really see that person. And that's something that you could ask AI for it, but they don't have the ability to like see you and their polyvagal nerve network of like connecting through the eyes, nose, and mouth, and be able to see micro expressions and nuances of body language and all these things.
And maybe it'll, I don't know, maybe it'll get there. In which case, I don't know, I'll sort something out. But in the very short term, I think what's going to get replaced is just highly technical, manualized approaches to therapy, which really, at the end of the day, there's not a lot of evidence to show, with a few meaningful exceptions, there's really no evidence to show that it's really the manualized treatment itself that's bringing about success. It's this relationship. It's that kind of stuff.
Totally. I mean, I've been with my somatic therapist for going on 4 years now, and I'm able to bring my newborn son, who's like, well, he's not newborn anymore, but he hangs out and does therapy with both of us, and integrates him and gives me feedback about my son. And that's something that I just could never replace. That's a human connection between the three of us. And yeah, it's been pretty magic. So I agree. All right. So I'm curious, what's feeling especially aligned or successful in your work right now, either clinical practice or your role as a teacher or thought leader?
Well, I think the teaching and training stuff has really kind of come on. So I've always really enjoyed teaching, always really enjoyed that, and set an intention probably 10 years ago that I really wanted to do this. I wanted this to be a significant part of my professional work and my professional life. And I'm thinking about this year, what I have in front of me and what I have behind me just in 2025. So I did a couple speaking and teaching things in Florida in March. Mm-hmm. In April, I was in Bulgaria working with pedagogical specialists and therapists. I was in Boise last week giving a keynote presentation at a substance abuse recovery conference. Tomorrow, I get on a plane to fly to Portland to present at a conference there. I'll be just outside of St. Louis teaching at a 2-week summer school, really doing that's like my dream job. That for me is like the top of Everest, teaching at this summer school, and I've been doing that for a few years now. And then I'll be teaching in Georgia at a conference, and then teaching at my local conference here in South Carolina, all while putting together a second cohort of a post-grad training program that I put together. And that is wild to me, to think that, like, that would have seemed impossible to me just a few years ago, to think that I would be doing this much teaching, some of it even getting paid for it. I spent a long time really paying to do the work, because you fly somewhere and teach a conference and they don't pay you. And I'm not saying that to complain. It's just what it is, and it helped me put in a lot of hours and do something that I love doing. It's not like, it's really not even hard. It's hard work, but it's so deeply enjoyable that it hardly feels like work. So Yeah, I think that's the bit that feels most rewarding. Finishing up this fellowship program, we took a year and trained 16 counselors in Adlerian psychology, did that over the course of a year. And beautiful, beautiful relationships. To see things really click for those fellows, I think was exciting, and understanding that then they're going to take those things and help clients, right? So there's this kind of exponential impact that gets made by just doing a few things. To me, that is there's a high that I get from that is difficult to articulate. I love doing it.
Yeah, and it really circles back to the whole philosophy of Adlerian, and you're embodying it yourself. On the flip side, is there anything that's been challenging lately, whether in therapy or managing the growth of a people-centered practice?
Yeah, I mean, I think that always when you're working with people, there are things that are just tough, you know? I mean, some of it is with clients, and of course, I'm not going to share anything really specific about my clients. I want to maintain confidentiality and respect their stories, but, you know, they share things that are devastating. And if you care about them, that packs a punch. But it's more than just clients, you know, it's also the therapists at our practice. You know, there are folks that we've had working with us who then are kind of rolling off into other things, which we're thrilled for them, but there's a sense of loss. I mean, we adore these people, and it's sad in a kind of way to have them roll off, at least for a time. They'll always be welcome back at our practice. And then I do think that I have this kind of chronic problem. Probably some of your listeners can already diagnose this about me, but I'm doing too much. And so you get burnt out and you get tired, and also you let things slip through the cracks. We have an incredible therapist working at one of our offices who just had a baby, and it occurred to me this morning that I have not sent her like a congratulations card, or really like given her a phone call, like the most basic human things. And it's not out of my affection for her and for her husband, is just about endless. I love them ferociously. And so it is merely a reflection of the fact that I have chosen to have way too many things on my plate. And so I don't do some things that I need to do. And sometimes that can get heavy and frustrating in a kind of way, because I both don't want to take any plates down that are spinning, but also when I keep all these plates spinning, I end up making decisions that don't line up with my values, and that's a tension I think I'm going to live with for the rest of my life.
Yeah, I've definitely been coming to that realization that we all get the same 24 hours in a day, and it's all about delegation, and AI can help with that. So where can our listeners find out about you? Where's your work? What's your website? Any social media handles?
Yeah, okay. I mean, travelersrestcounseling.com is a really good place to start. We have a resources tab on that website that will connect you with a whole bunch of stuff that I've produced, and that I work a lot with my business partner that we've produced together. That would probably be the best place to connect. I am on social media. Instagram and Facebook are kind of my classics. That's where I spend most of my time, and I love connecting with folks. Even if I don't know you and you just shoot me a quick note being like, oh, I heard you on this podcast, I will 100% accept your request and interact. And I love making friends, connecting with folks, even who I've not met face to face. That's awesome to me.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Calvin, for being on the podcast. It's been a pleasure, and super excited to stay connected and see where things are headed.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for letting me share my thoughts, and it's just really nice to converse for a bit. Thanks so much.
Amazing. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Aligned Impact. I'm truly grateful to have you here in this growing community of leaders, innovators, and conscious change makers. Check the show notes for all the links and resources we mentioned today, and you can explore more of my work and programs over at FlowShala.com, or connect with me on social media at Summmer Huntington and YouTube as well for behind the scenes movement inspiration and business tips. Stay tuned for more episodes of Aligned Impact that inspire you to lead with intention, get empowered, and create aligned impact in your life and your community.